Hi, I'm Vanessa with Granny's Fabric House.
I'm Alan from Earth to Elegance.
And we are here because I put together a quilt for a donation for a silent auction. So Alan's going to tell us a little bit about that and what it's for.
So earlier this summer, we met Katie Did from Katie Did Rocks at the Spencer Opal Mine. And she let us know that every year she does a charity auction. It's called A Heart for Rocks. And the proceeds from the Heart for Rocks goes to the Geo Girls, which is a free girls geology camp for underprivileged girls at the Mount St. Helens Institute. So I put together kind of a little jewelry piece, and Vanessa graciously put together this beautiful quilt. And we're going to send them to Katie, but let's let Vanessa tell you what all this stuff means and why this quilt.
Yeah, so when we asked her if I could do a quilt, because most of it's all geology related, rocks, jewelry pieces, lapidary stuff, things like that. I wanted to do a quilt, but I wanted to represent different types of rocks that my husband's found when he's been either at rock shows or rock hounding throughout the area. And so when I was picking out my fabrics, I was picking out things that reminded me of different rocks. So when we got home, we went through Alan's cabochon. Did I say that right?
Cabochons, yeah.
Cabochon's stash that he's done to see how many actually matched the fabric that I chose. So let's start with this one.
Super. So this is a piece of tiger eye, and I purchased it at a rock show in Idaho Falls, and this kind of has a lot of flash and character to it and coordinates with that fabric beautifully.
Yeah, and all these fabrics are batiks that I picked up in Boise, Idaho. So this one right here, this actually reminds me of a salmon, but we're gonna not a salmon, I guess, probably a brown trout.
Probably a brown trout, but yeah. So this cabochon is a piece of rhyolite, and it comes from the Spencer Opal Mine, just right here in Spencer, Idaho, right in our backyard.
Let's do this one.
Super. This piece is a jasper agate, and I collected this one in Shelley, Idaho, along the side of a road in some fill dirt. Pretty unique piece.
I'm going to take close-ups of them, so we'll keep them together. And then we have this piece here.
Okay, and this is a piece of mahogany obsidian. And I'm not positive where this thing came from. When I was rock collecting, I picked it up, and in an area where obsidian doesn't exist. So it had to have been transported there by humans at some point in time, because there's no other obsidian in that area.
All right, so I picked two for this piece of fabric. So
super. And these are both Idaho agates, and they were collected out of the Chalice Volcanics area. This is a piece of tube agate, and this is a piece of seam agate. And a good friend of mine, Mike, gave me this piece, and I collected this piece.
All right. And I thought this one matched really well.
It really does. This is a piece of rainforest jasper, and I picked it up at a rock and gem mineral show.
And the last two pieces from our favorite friends.
Right. This is a piece of Arizona agate, and it comes from the Arizona Rockhound Expeditions mines. Brian and Julie sent me this piece and the next piece as well.
I thought these two went really well together too.
This is same thing. This is another Arizona agate from AZRE Expeditions, Arizona Rock Hounding Expeditions.
And the other piece of fabric that's in here is, this is a specialty fabric from JK Quilts out of Boise, Idaho. They're the only ones who carry this fabric. And it has, I know this geology group is in Washington, right? But this has the state of Idaho on it.
And we're from Idaho.
And we're from Idaho.
We had to put our stamp in it.
We did. And it really just reminds me of just an agate, just the different colors that you can see that forms in agates and different other styles of rocks. So yeah, as you watch on, you'll see me kind of go through the process of how I made this quilt and how we put it all together from start to finish. And I believe it's about 52 by 63 inches, so a nice lap quilt. On the back of it is what they call fireside fabric, kind of like a soft minky. I wanted to stay true to the nature when I quilted it and did the quilting design. So the thread for the design is actually called trout.
Nice.
And the quilting design that I picked is called Aurora. So yeah. All right, well, continue watching and see how this thing came together.
I hope you enjoyed that little preview of rocks and how we decided to come together to make this quilt. Right now what I'm doing is fussy cutting specific sections of the fabric that I want to put in the quilt. I cut 24 of these out of the fabric, and I mostly focused on the Idaho shape and tried to get that exactly where I wanted it. I kind of wanted to shift them around a little bit so they weren't all identical, and the Idaho kind of had some movement to it. So go ahead and enjoy the little preview here of me cutting out the Idaho shaped fabrics, and then we'll move on to the next section. Now that all my Idaho shapes are cut out, I need to cut the fabric for the pieces that are going to go around it to finish off my block. So here I'm just deciding how much of this fabric I'm going to need and trim a little off because I bought a little more than I actually was going to need. So I'm cutting them. That little white paper is actually my little notes on what sizes to make. Pretty sure I cut these strips at 3.5 inches. And then I cut down to some squares that were 3.5 inches wide. And then I think the last one was 9.5 inches. I may not be exact on that, but close enough, I'm sure. So then I just did this with all the fabrics that coordinate, and I wasn't sure how much I was going to need because I still at this point wasn't sure exactly what I was going to lay it out like. So I just made a bunch. And here you can continue watching me cut some strips. I don't show you all the cutting because that would take forever. So here we go. All right, now I have everything cut out. I'm just going to separate them into piles between the long strips and the short strips. And then I'll take them over to the sewing machine. Here you can see I'm trying to lay it out, kind of get an idea or a feel of how I want to do it. And then I'll take it to the sewing machine and start sewing pieces together. Okay, here we are at the sewing machine. I don't show you much of this, but I pretty much just put 2 of the squares together and just chain piece them. I just randomly decided to put them together in no specific way. And then here I am setting my seams, which is just putting a little bit of heat and iron to the seam side. Once I do this, I'll go ahead and iron them open. Okay, here I am using my little lovely starch pin. This is just a paint pin actually that is refillable, and I just fill it with starch. I make my own starch. It's called Granny's Magic Starch. Love it. It's the best starch I've ever used. But I just put a little dab on the seam, fold it open, and then put some heat to it. Underneath that little wooden piece that's called a tailor's clapper. So once I iron it open, I put it on under my tailor's clapper just to kind of make the seam a little flatter. Here's my beautiful granddaughter, Miss Ellie, and her lovely crown. What girl doesn't need a crown, seriously? And here we go, just gonna iron all these open. Okay, now we have them all ironed open. I'm going to start sewing the 2 pieces that I just sewn together onto the side of my blocks. Here I am just kind of trying to decide what I'm going to do still. I think I'm going to, what I decided was to just kind of go around the block and sew, like turn it. I think I turned it counterclockwise. I tried to as I sewed them on, so that way each side would get the 2 pieces, so it just kind of would go around and around. I think it turned out really well in the end. I still wasn't sure how it was going to look at this point either, so your guess was as good as mine. And here I am just trying to, this one obviously needed trimmed up a bit, which is fine, it happens. Trying to make sure it all matches. Just going to chain piece all these together, so it'll take a little bit of time. So here we are, my granddaughter came to visit again. We needed a little snack break, so this is my little snackle that sits next to my sewing machine. So whenever I need a little quick snack, it's available. We're just gonna keep going. Had to grab my water and just keep sewing away. Looks like this is the last piece here. So after that, I need to cut all of them apart because they're all chain pieced together. This is my little flower cutter. So I just kind of snap everyone and keep on going. After this, we'll add the next piece of fabric. All right, now I'm counting to make sure I have enough blocks, even though I know I cut 24. Maybe I cut 25, I can't remember. I took a couple times counting through. And I'm also gonna sort them by which direction the Idaho is as well. So here I am getting ready to sew the piece, the longer strip, onto the quilt block here. Now that we have those done, we're going to cut them as well and then organize them. So we'll cut them and then set my seams, iron the flap open, and then I'll organize them by shapes. Oh, this one it looks like I had a little mistake there, so I'm just gonna use my seam ripper and re-sew it back on. I think I sewed it onto the wrong side. Now we're all fixed, ready to move on, counting again, because that's what we do. Making sure I have enough, putting them in the directions that the Idaho is facing. All right, after counting, I decided I still needed one more, which is funny because I ended up with one extra block at the end. Anyways, so we're gonna go ahead and do that last one. And then those are just all my extra scraps. I did have quite a few extra, which is fine. I'll use them in another quilt somewhere. And here I'm just gonna set my seams, iron everything open, and yeah, put some little heat to it and set it aside and just keep going. After this, we're gonna go ahead and go upstairs and lay all the blocks out on one of the beds that I have, just so I can make the arrangement and lay it out the way I want it. I did skip that step videoing it, but that's okay. And we're just gonna keep doing this for just a bit, and we'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the next step afterwards. Okay, so at this point I have all the rows sewn together, and I did a stop border. It's that little white edge that I'm pinning this border to. So I'm putting the final borders on here. What I like to do is I like to measure my quilt in 5 different spots so that I can get the average of the width of the quilt, and then also on the top and the bottom border. I'll take that average, and that's what I cut my border out to be. Then I fold it in fourths and crease it, and fold my quilt in fourths and crease it. And then I'll pin at each end and at the creases, and then a little bit in between, just so if there's any fullness, I can get that squared up. So that's what you see me doing here, just pinning my borders. I like to take some time doing this so that my quilt is nice and square. I wish putting borders on was this fast, but obviously this is a sped up version, so it takes quite a bit longer to do this part of it. I really enjoy putting borders on. It's one of my favorite things to do, that and binding. This is also like putting the final touches on it, so putting the borders on is pretty relaxing and relieving, because you know that you're close to the end and almost all done with your quilt. Here I am again, just pinning, taking that fullness and kind of adjusting it, make sure the edges line up really nice. And I believe this is the last strip as we go on. The next step after the borders is to quilt it. So I load it on my long arm and do the quilting to piece it together with the backing and the batting and the quilt top that you see here. Okay, so I have all my binding strips cut. That's what these are. They're 2.5-inch strips, length of fabric. Here I am just marking a 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to sew them together at that angle so it makes one big long strip. I like to do this on the bias. So as you can see, I'm just going to continue to do this for a bit, and then we'll go on to the next step. Here I am quilting it. I already have it loaded like we talked about earlier, and you can see my backing. I like to float my top, which means that my top is not rolled on a bar like the backing is. And here my long arm is just doing its thing. Looks like it's time to roll the quilt, so I'm going to do that here. And then the next step, I baste up the sides just to keep my quilt top in place, straightening it all out. And there I'm nesting. Now it's time to baste up the sides. And that's just a longer stitch length there, about a 1/2 inch is what I do when I baste up my sides. And then start the machine over, and it will just automatically do its thing, which I love. I love not having to stand at my quilt to do custom quilting because I don't have time for that. So I just let it do its thing. Now this is me attaching the binding on the back side of the quilt, and we just do this for a little bit, and then we'll flip it over and attach it to the top. Okay, here I am to the end, so I have to measure and trim so that I connect the two pieces together, and I really enjoy this part too. I guess it's just the challenge of it to make sure that it lays flat and there's no wrinkles in it. So I really enjoy putting binding together. It's one of my favorite parts. So here I am just matching the ends, and then I'm going to again kind of mark it. I don't mark my 45-degree angle, I just kind of eyeball it, and then I test it before I cut, make sure I didn't twist anything or do it the wrong way, because that happens. And then just finally the final seam to attach that to the blanket and to the quilt, and it will be all done on the back side. Then we flip it all over, iron it, press it so that it lays flat, and now here I am getting ready to attach it to the top. Here I'm at the corner, kind of fussing with it a little bit to make sure I got a really good miter corner so that it lays nicely. Here we are on the final stretch of putting the binding on. Looks like the very end and the final reveal. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.